All very much for coming this evening to this meeting of Kensington Chelsea's Planning Applications Committee. You're all very welcome indeed. My name is Charles O'Connor. I am the Vice Chairman of the committee and I'm chairing this evening's proceedings. It's a slightly sad evening for me in a sense because it's my final evening chairing this committee, which I've done for the last 3 or 4 years. And I've enjoyed that very much, and I would just pay tribute to the officers who've tolerated me over that period and put up with my strange foibles and dislike of plastic windows and other things, and also to my fellow councillors, and particularly and sadly to Councillor Malcolm Spalding, who recently died, the ward councillor for Earls Court ward, and who was a very important member of this committee for many years, and yeah, we remember him. I will just introduce the councillors this evening. We have, rather oddly, in fact, the chairman of the committee, the Lord High Executioner, Councillor James Husband, is here, and Councillor Mo Bakhtiar, and Councillor Walla Idris, and Councillor Dory Schmetling. They, together with me, will be taking the decisions this evening. The officers here this evening, the senior officer here is Martin Lomas on my immediate left, and the officers presenting this evening are Cheryl Savarus, Katie Hurrell and Derek Taylor, and we're joined by Lorna Bowery from the legal department, thank you very much to her as well, and some of the officers from governance, and thank you very much to both of you for all you do. If anyone else needs to speak, I will introduce them as we go along. If you've attended one of our meetings before, you'll recognise our procedure, but it's quite straightforward. We just go through the agenda and I will lead you through it as we go. There are the minutes of one previous meeting that we need to deal with, and that is the meeting of the 22nd of February, which was chaired by me. I've already read those minutes and I'm happy with them, but could I have the agreement of the committee that I may sign them as a true and accurate record? Thank you very much.
Agreed.
Excellent. Well, declarations of interest or any other declarations, colleagues, are there any, please?
Not from me.
No. There's one declaration from me, and that is in relation to the application we're hearing this evening for number 57 Cathcart Road. There is an objection from someone who is represented by a solicitor in the firm of which I'm a partner. And I've never met the person who has written the objection on behalf of the objector. And so I have no concerns about me hearing that application, but just for completeness, I mention it. The running order... I beg your pardon, yes. There are no apologies for absence, as I understand it, so that's now minuted. And the running order is, first of all, Phil Beach Gardens, then 186 Holland Park Avenue, then Camelford Court, and then Barrington Walk, and various other walks on the Lancaster West Estate, then 117 Earls Court Road, then Harcourt Terrace, Cavey Place, the kiosk at Gloucester Road, and finally the Cathcart Road application that I mentioned just now. So we will move first of all to the presentation on number 60 Phil Beach Gardens. I think that's Katie Hurrell, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. The application site, sorry, the slide's not moving along for me. There we go. The application site is a 4-storey mid-terrace property with a lower ground floor on Phil Beach Gardens. I've marked it there in blue for you on the screen. The application relates to the front entrance of the property. this next slide is just a photograph of that entrance. Things to note are the 2 steps that you can see up from pavement floor level, and then the railings to the right-hand side of the entrance. Planning permission is sought for a wheelchair platform lift to create level access into the property. I'm afraid that the drawing's a little bit difficult to interpret, but this is the elevational drawing when the wheelchair lift is folded up and not in use. So it will be folded up and stored adjacent to the railings on the right-hand side of the entrance as you're looking at the property. Perhaps easier to understand looking at the plan there. This shows it when the lift is in use. So you'll see there's 2 red boxes. Hopefully you can make out my cursor. The red box that's vertical on the screen there, that's the platform lift. When it's down and ready to be used, it would then go along a railing, which would be attached to the black railings I showed you in that photograph, around the corner and down onto the pavement. This is my rather crude attempt of illustrating that a bit clearer for you all. So please don't take those boxes as an accurate representation, but hopefully they give you an idea. So the yellow box is when the lift would be folded up against the railings, and then the 2 red boxes show you the location as that wheelchair platform would be in use and around the corner of the pavement. These images are just for information only. They are taken from the Wheelchair Lift Product Company website, so they're not necessarily an accurate representation of the exact model that would be installed, but I thought it was useful just to give you an indication of what the platform lift would look like, both when folded up and when in use. In terms of the impact on the street scene, there are no other lifts of this nature along Phil Beach Gardens. I walked down there myself this morning. There are other items like bin stores and bins adjacent to the railings. There's a couple of images on the screen there for you. But to confirm, this would be the only wheelchair lift. And you'll have seen from the officer's report that we have concluded that there is a degree of harm from this installation to the appearance of the property and the character and appearance of the conservation area. We've deemed it less than substantial harm. And then weight has been given to the public benefit of creating access for wheelchair users into the building. You'll also note that this went to committee back in March of this year, and it was deferred by members who asked for some more information regarding the other access arrangements within the building. So the applicant currently lives at the basement level, and it was questioned how this lift would really be of much benefit to this resident if they still had to use stairs to get up from basement to ground floor level. And members felt that without understanding this, they weren't able to attribute weight to the public benefit. They wanted to know more. So since then, we have requested some further information. It's listed at paragraph 2.1 of your report, but just briefly, we have seen confirmation that there's been adaptation to the bathroom to make it wheelchair accessible, and importantly that a stair lift has been installed between the basement and the ground floor level within that flat. We've seen an invoice for the installation and a certificate post-installation to show that it has been installed. So hopefully members are now able to make a more informed decision and determine the weight that they feel appropriate. The last thing I wanted to just draw members' attention to was condition 4. The addendum does slightly tweak the wording of that condition, but essentially that condition is saying, given that we are concluding there is a degree of harm here, that we only think it's appropriate for the lift to be in place when it's truly of benefit to this resident. So the condition requires the lift's removal once that resident vacates the building. And that concludes the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for that. And now we have a registered objector, Mr. Froment, and you, sir, have the opportunity to address us for up to 3 minutes as to why you're opposed to this. So when you're ready, please, and I'll let you know when your 3 minutes are up.
Okay, thank you. I am a neighbour at 61 Phil Beach Gardens and represent the residents of number 61, the Phil Beach Residents Association, the Earls Court Society and Councillor Wade, who wanted to speak tonight but is attending the hustings instead. It's with a heavy heart, but we are all united against the proposal in its current form. We fully recognise the applicant's needs, but this proposal is insensitive and fails the strict requirements of the Filbeach Conservation Area. It would be a modern intrusion and would inhibit the mobility of other elderly residents in the building. We feel the officer's report is misleading in the following respects. It says the building would become accessible to wheelchair users and that the harm to the conservation area would be balanced by the public benefits of providing accessible entry to the building. But this proposal is for the personal use of only one user and would not have any public benefit. The report implies that an internal stairlift has been fitted, but the freeholder Notting Hill Trust cannot confirm that. The report says that the folding platform would be located off the highway when not in use. While true when the user is at home, it would be folded up on the pavement when he is out, obstructing pedestrians potentially for hours at a time. No details have been provided, but we assume the track and folded platform would protrude about 2 feet onto the pavement. The unsightly structure would dominate the entrance, and the turn onto the pavement in front of the neighbouring property would damage the streetscape. Other photos, different to the ones that have been shown on the company's website, look ugly. They're nearer to the model as far as I could see, compared with the ones that were shown, and are out of keeping with the Victorian buildings and railings. The proposal doesn't consider the high risk of vandalism from undesirables attracted by daily free lunches at the neighbouring St Cuthbert Centre. Only last week graffiti was scribbled on our door. The applicant lives in the basement and must climb stairs to the ground floor. This proposal addresses only the comparatively minor problem of 3 well-spaced shallow steps between the front door and the pavement, which he currently manages unaided. The application might seem fine on paper to those unfamiliar with the building's unique location, but a visit to the site makes it obvious that much better solutions exist, with none of these drawbacks. Like me, the applicant has his own private entrance to the basement, so a vertical lift could be installed to bring him directly from the basement to the pavement, with no impact on the building, pavement, or other residents. The house has an unusually wide and generous front basement area, large enough for a shed to store and recharge the scooter, and a lift from the basement to street level. A secure gate could be introduced to match the existing railings. Were this properly planned and consulted, it would have our total support. RPKC created conservation areas to preserve our architectural heritage and has a duty to protect them for future generations. Once damage is permitted, it is very hard to restore. Filbeach Gardens is special with its symmetry and its red brick and tessellated front entrances. This heritage must be preserved. Please defer this application and request a new design that reflects the applicant's needs while respecting the irreplaceable integrity of our architecture in the conservation area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well timed, very nearly 3 minutes. So now we have the opportunity, colleagues, to put questions to Mr. Froment. So who would like to go first? Councillor Schmetterling.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, I couldn't actually understand 100%, but I got about 90% of what you said. You said there are better solutions, and you mentioned a lift. I don't know. I'm looking at the actual street view picture, so I can zoom in a bit. And I can see a staircase, not very wide, but some stairs going down towards the basement on the left of that entrance. And I presume that's the basement we're talking about.
So the basement is to the left of where that blue arrow is, yes. And there are stairs that go down there, yes.
So are you're suggesting there could be a lift from there? I mean, obviously I don't know what it looks like down there, but are you suggesting there could be a lift in the space, despite the stairs being there?
That's right. There's quite a wide gap between the stairs and the left-hand edge of the property, which is quite wide enough to put a lift in that could then come straight up from the basement to the pavement level.
And why do you think the applicant currently navigates the existing 3 steps from the front door to the pavement with ease?
Because we see him doing it. He has a mobility scooter which he folds up and then carries...
Sorry, could you speak into your microphone, please?
He has a mobility scooter which he folds up and carries into the house with him. He goes up the stairs unaided.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, any further questions? Councillor Bakhtiar.
We have 6 objections. Does that mean everyone lives in that building is objecting to this application, apart from the applicant?
No. to my knowledge, one person living in the building has objected. Other objections have come from Councillor Wade, from myself obviously, from the Earls Court Society and other local residents. The person, the applicant, is known to be difficult, and I think a lot of the other people living in that building are somewhat scared of objecting. That's my view.
Okay. Do you think there is something we could fix between these two? So do you think the solution is either accept or reject, or could we put conditions?
I can't see what conditions would make it an attractive solution, and I think there are, I think, potentially other solutions that you could consider. You could consider, for example, modifying the steps to turn them into a ramp. They are very shallow steps. There's only 3 steps in total. They're well spaced out by about 2 meters between each step, and they're only 5 inches high. So the steps could be modified to turn it to make a ramp that the scooter could easily go up. That's another alternative. If he has in fact got an internal chairlift and stair lift, and that might be a solution. But as I said, Notting Hill Trust couldn't confirm that he's got that. They're the freeholders of the building, so the report says he has. They say they don't know, so don't know.
Thank you.
Councillor Idris.
You know where he lives. Does he live in the basement or
Yes.
in the ground floor?
No, he lives in the basement.
So he lives in the basement, and he uses the entrance, go up the 2 steps,
Yes.
go downstairs. Does he go downstairs to the basement via a lift or by stairs?
He's got stairs.
So he uses the stairs to go down to the basement to his flat
Yes.
and come back up to the ground floor.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I think we should just add that the report suggests that there's an internal stair lift. That's the evidence that's been provided to officers. So Mr. Fremont's just providing his view there. Councillor Schmettler.
Yeah, so I just want to confirm that. It does say clearly, and the officer did say, Ms. Harrell did say they've seen the invoice for it, that there's an internal stair lift. But the question I have is to the objector is, have you tried to discuss it with the applicant? Because maybe it looks easy for him to go those steps, but maybe it isn't, and maybe there's costs involved. There's all kinds of factors. So have you tried to discuss, for example, the ramp with him?
No, I haven't discussed it with him personally. I was advised by Councillor Wade that that would be inadvisable. She knows him better than I do, and I was advised that it would not be advisable to try and talk to him about it.
Thank you.
Any further questions, colleagues, to Mr. Fremont? No. Okay, well, thank you very much indeed, sir. And we will now discuss the issue with officers. Thank you for your contribution. Colleagues, questions to Ms. Harrell? Councillor Idris.
Thank you. I was wondering, are the railings of any historical significance?
I mean, the railings you can see on the screen there are clearly a prominent feature of the street. So I think we would definitely suggest that they are of value and they contribute positively to the conservation area.
Will adding that lift with the equipment, will it damage the railings?
We don't believe it will damage them. You'll see that we have recommended condition 3, which requires some additional details of exactly how that railing would work, particularly on the corner onto the pavement. And that's to ensure that we're comfortable that the railing could be, and the chair lift could be installed without damaging those railings.
And how much will the lift use space-wise when it's in operation of the platform? Will it use half of the platform or a bit of it, 10% of it?
So hopefully you can see that plan on the screen. If not, the drawing is in your
half.
pack. It might be a bit clearer. So you can see where that vertical red box is. That's the lower of the steps. And I suppose, yes, approximately half of the depth of that would be taken up, and just over half the width of that step would be taken up when it is in use.
And in operation, does it cause, I don't know, trip hazard by any chance, you would think?
I mean, this is without, seeing it installed. I suspect when it's in use, it might be quite difficult for another person to sort of use the steps at the same time. But that's just my personal view.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. I have a question, if I may, for Ms. Harrell. If we accept that this lift does present some harm, am I right in thinking that we then have to weigh that harm against the benefits? And am I also right in thinking that we should take into account some disability legislation when considering benefits? That may be a question for Lorna Byrie, the legal officer, but I don't know if perhaps one of you would like to help us with
Perhaps
that.
if I
Thank you.
start, and then Lorna might want to chip in. But yes, when there is, as we've concluded, less than substantial harm to a heritage asset, the conservation area, the MPPF is clear that we should then take into account any public benefits that might outweigh that harm. So as decision makers this evening, the job that you need to do is consider how much weight you want to give the benefit if you see that there is a public benefit, and do you consider that is substantial enough to outweigh the less than substantial harm. As part of that, yes, there is the Equalities Act, which should weigh into your decision. And so I would suggest when you're considering the weight to give it, that is part of the thought process that you go through to ensure that you are also taking into account that legislation.
Okay.
Lorna, did you want to say
Thank you.
anything more on that?
Yeah, the equality legislation we're referring to is the public sector equality duty, which binds all public authorities, well, most of them, including this council. Basically, you have a duty to have due regard to the need to eliminate discrimination, which could include a disability. I mean, in particular, you've just got to have due regard to removing or minimising disadvantages that someone might have over another person, and take steps to meet the needs of persons who are maybe less advantaged than other people. But it's a duty to have regard to the discriminatory legislation, not to you just have to show that you have thought about it, given some real thought to it in your decision.
So I thought
So
the
it is
fact
a
we
case of weighing. It is a case of weighing it up.
the fact we're discussing it now suggests
Absolutely,
we are
because it
giving
would be
regard,
minuted.
which is interesting. And
Yeah.
it presumably doesn't mean that we automatically have to approve anything that facilitates access for someone with a disability.
Well, again, it's something you have to have regard to. It doesn't mean that you have to always follow the Act, so long as you can evidence that you have thought about it, and you do have to weigh up, the sort of the personal circumstances, if you like, of the resident of Flat B against the wider harm to the conservation area. So it is still a balance that you have to take, but having regard to your public sector equality duty.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's very helpful. Thank you very much. Councillor Bakhtiar, I saw you first.
Thank you. Applicants normally seek pre-planning consultation or ask services provided by the planning department. Did the applicant explore the possibility of installing a lift? Because they live in the basement. I have seen many cases like this. If you cut the railing, you would install a lift in there, which is access directly to the flat, basement flat. This option has it been explored?
No, I can confirm this is the only option we've had presented to us as a local planning authority. I believe it was just the option suggested by the occupational therapy referral. But yes, it may well be that alternative options are possible. It may be that they're not. I wouldn't want to give you the impression that it would be possible to do another lift. It may well be. We don't have that evidence before us to prove either way.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Schmetling.
This is an interesting question because if you look at the steps, at the entrance porch and that, if you have the lift from the basement, which of course it's not the subject of this meeting, but I'm just saying that if you do look at it, you have to remove the railings, it strikes me, on the left-hand side. But my question really is to explore the concerns of actually Councillor Wade's comments, her concerns in her objection. One is she thought it was an irreversible change because the condition is that this is reversed completely if that resident leaves. So there's no trace left of that lift. So that's the first thing. How justified is that concern? And secondly, I must say the concern expressed by, I think, more than one person is that the railings may not support the weight, because to me, that's what it also looks like. So what measures will be taken to make sure, we say, it won't be damaged, but what happens if it collapses? That's extreme damage. Could you also speak into the microphone? Don't look at me, look at the mic, please.
Yes, so the condition requires its removal 3 months off. I think it's within 3 months of the resident vacating the property, whenever that is. If you wanted to strengthen the condition and put in words along the line of and restore it to its former condition, that's quite a common wording that I think would be entirely appropriate to add if you wanted to. In terms of the question about are we confident the railings wouldn't be damaged, there's nothing to indicate that they would. As I say, we've requested further details about the railing, but again, if a condition was felt necessary to ensure that we had further details on that, again, that's something that we could apply. They are, metal railings. I believe that there would obviously be some sort of support within the railing and the platform lift itself, but again, I can't give you more reassurances than that.
Because, the stresses and strains when one is seated, I presume it's a seating arrangement that the applicant sits on it, doesn't put the wheelchair on it, but sits on it. Whatever it is, it's weighted at an angle, so the support will be only on the railing, so you could I don't know how it's done, but I just can see the railings might collapse. I'm not saying they would, but they might. And okay, and do you agree that just as a sort of an informed consent comment, that if you had a lift direct to the basement, you'd have to remove the railing on the left of that entrance? Otherwise, how would the person get in there? Or remove a railing on the pavement, or remove a railing on the porch? I don't see it.
Without seeing plans, it's hard to say. But yes, it looks certainly that way. But perhaps there would be a way of introducing a gate or something. I don't know. But yeah, some sort of access would have to be created in that.
Okay, thanks.
I'd just like to ask Ms. Horrell, to what extent is the question of whether the railings would support the lift a matter for us? I'm not wholly convinced it is. It's a sort of construction issue, really, isn't it, rather than a planning issue? Don't know.
Generally, yes, I suppose you could argue that if there was evidence that they would damage it, then potentially that results in harm to the character and appearance of the conservation area. But yes, I would sort of steer away from too much thought on that. I think it's,
Bit of a grey area.
Yeah.
Chair, I've got a
Thank you
related
very much.
question to this, if I may ask.
You may.
Let's suppose, thank you. Let's suppose that if this were granted and the chairlift is installed and it, after say a couple of months or even a month or less, you see the thing bending, the railings bending, then what? Even if the lift stays usable?
Yeah, a good question, I suppose. If there was significant damage to the railings, then perhaps it would no longer be in accordance with the plans, and we might be able to take appropriate action that way. I suppose it depends on the extent of damage and what happens. This is all sort of hypothetical, isn't it? So it's difficult really to comment too much.
I suppose one could condition that too.
Seems to me it's a private law issue, largely. as to the damage done to what's probably the freeholder's property,
Yeah.
rather than
Yeah,
the
rather than
demise of
something
the
for-
leaseholder. I'm not sure we need to get too hung up with that. Colleagues, any further questions to officers before we move on to discuss it? Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much. So now we have the opportunity to discuss amongst ourselves, should we so choose. Councillor Bakhtiar, I think you've got a view by the looks of this.
Listening to the officers and the objectors, I have learned that less harmful options is available and should have been explored, I think. So, in my view, this, even though the applicant had an option to seek advice and look into it, they didn't. So, I think we shouldn't approve this application because the applicant didn't explore other options.
Right. So you're minded to refuse the application. We have to think to ourselves whether the extent to which the applicant has explored different options would be a good ground to refuse it, or whether we're looking more at harm to the conservation area, I'd suggest. But colleagues, Councillor Husband.
Thank you, Chairman. It's a difficult one, but I suspect that a case has been made that there is a harm to the conservation area, and I think that's correct. I think in a slightly different formulation of what Councillor Bakhtiar said, I think if a very clear case had been made that this was clearly the only solution that could possibly work, then maybe the balancing act might be slightly different. But I think as it is, I think, marginally, the harm to the conservation area, which is less than substantial, I think still nevertheless probably means that the application isn't acceptable.
Very nicely put. Thank you very much. Councillor Idris, were you going to add something, or do you agree?
It was James, yeah.
Yeah.
See, looking at that picture over there, which we saw originally with a red rectangle on the on the porch, it's not at the highest level, so that looks like the last step would be not covered by the lift, because
It goes this way. It
goes from the,
from the bottom all the way.
but not all the way up.
Yeah, well,
It goes up level with the top step, I think.
Yeah,
It doesn't do the
I wonder if it's helpful for me just to clarify, the
Sorry.
plans do also,
Pardon?
I wonder if it's helpful for me to clarify, the plans do also show that last concrete threshold, the step at immediately outside the front door, that would be levelled off.
I see. Because, I mean, I must admit, when I first saw this, I thought the obvious one is a ramp. Although, if it's loose pieces that they could be stolen, but I'm sure there are solutions. Anyway, that's it.
All right. Well, thank you all very much. My feeling is that possibly this might be acceptable. I came to it before hearing Councillor Bakhtiar's and Councillor Husband's view, thinking this is not ideal, but I weighed the equalities requirements slightly more heavily and thought that providing disabled access to the building, and in circumstances where the applicant apparently has already installed an internal stair lift, so I thought that completing the disabled access route, if you like, was of greater benefit or outweighed the harm to the building. But that's just a slightly different take on it. I think it's finely balanced. Councillor Schmetterling.
Chair, I mean, I'm inclined, I've also follow that kind of thinking, but what I found a little bit worrying is that this is quite an important measure that affects the other residents of the building, maybe not so much when it's all folded up, but that there's been no internal discussion apparently, and because one of the councillors suggested it's not a good idea to talk, I find that difficult to somehow take in, because even if a person is difficult, that person perhaps should have approached the rest of the residents to discuss options and say, as was said, as I think Councillor Bakhtiar said, this is the only option or the best option or whatever. And that's also, I find, a little bit difficult to take in. There was apparently no discussion with the other residents.
Yeah. Well, as is often the case, we're considering what's before us, as it is with the history, good and bad. I think we now have to come to make a decision on this. I've put my view out there, but as I say, it's extremely finely balanced, and I hear two of the fellow councillors certainly with their view that this is not acceptable, but I think we'll just go to a vote on it. The recommendation is that the committee grants planning permission with the conditions listed in section 8 of this report.
Chairman, sorry, before we do that, can I just check? I mean, obviously there's the updated condition 4. Was there any other condition that was going to be added? I mean, condition 4 does already say that if it's to be removed within 3 months, the land has to be restored to its former condition. There wasn't any other condition you wanted to add?
That's right. No,
okay,
I noted that it does have
just
the
as
former
is.
condition wording in it.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. No, so just the addendum condition 4 rather than the original report condition 4. So the recommendation is that the committee grants planning permission with the conditions listed in section 8 of this report as amended. Could I please see those in favour of the recommendation?
Given the amended condition 4, actually, I would grant it.
So that's 2 in favour of the recommendation. And can I please see those against the recommendation? So that's 3 against the recommendation. Planning permission is not granted on that basis. So we now need to come up with the reason why it's not granted. And officers, if you could help us with that, please, having heard the discussion.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I would suggest that the reason for refusal focuses on the harm to the conservation area, and that we clarify that there's insufficient public benefits to outweigh the less than substantial harm.
That sounds very sensible. So I think we...
And also, Chairman, sorry, in sort of part of the reason for refusal would be that you have considered your duty under the public sector equality duty, under the Act, the Equality.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you very much. So we need a motion proposing the refusal, and Councillor Idris is going to propose that motion. We've heard the suggested terms of it, and in a second, Councillor Bakhtiar. Okay, so we now need to vote on the motion to refuse planning permission for the reasons we've just discussed, and could I please see those in favour of the refusal on those grounds? So it's the same 3 councillors who voted against it first time, and those against the motion. So consistently, again, Councillor Schmetterling and I are voting against that motion. So planning permission is refused on that basis. Thank you very much. We will move to 186 Holland Park Avenue. Thank you.
Right, so the next application this evening is for the flank wall of number 186 Holland Park Avenue. You'll have seen the history for the site set out, obviously, in the report, and you'll have seen in the addendum reports that we've had further representations from neighbours who are understandably critical of the large advertisement on the side of the building. The first slide I'm showing you there is the official submitted drawing, which shows the west-facing flank of the building. And you can see outlined in red the 10-metre-high advertisement, which is actually, technically it's a shroud advertisement. I mean, it's set on scaffolding, which is erected on that side of the building. And in that slide, I think you can see very clearly where the advertisement sits. So the The buildings that you see there are listed. So basically the scaffolds and the advertisement obscure the west-facing flank of the listed building. And you can see there the scale of it and the visibility of it. And then in the next slide, that's just a longer shot looking eastwards now from the roundabout. Different advertisement shown on the same hoarding in the same position. So I think that slide's most useful to see the relationship to the parent building. And then that slide's just most useful to see the overall context. I mean, when I look at those slides, I mean, along with, I think, most of the neighbours who've written in, I mean, I find that advertisement to be harmful to amenity. I mean, it's very visible, couldn't be much more visible. And on the flank of a listed building, I mean, I've got absolutely no difficulty in concluding very quickly that harms the amenity of that vicinity. I'm not alone in that. Obviously, the neighbours think the same thing. But more importantly, the inspectors who have gone before have also concluded that the advertisement in that position would be harmful to amenity. And I think that's where the decision gets rather difficult now for the planning authority. And really, for that reason, the inspectors' conclusions on the impact on amenity. Consent was granted, as you'd have seen in the report, in December 2020 for a period of 18 months in which it was hoped that the applicants would finish off the building works at the site, and then the justification for the scaffolding would be removed. Now, it's sought to extend that period by 5 further months. The applicants have submitted a schedule of works that would take us through to December this year. And in their submission, they need that extra time to finish off the work. And the work had been delayed due to supply problems related to COVID and post-Brexit and whatever else. Now, the neighbours have sort of raised questions as to the speed of the work, and to be honest, I can imagine, well, at least I can't imagine a much slower rate of work. I mean, they've hardly been working apace, but there may be good reasons behind that. And I think the problem for the planning authority is that we just don't have any evidence to question their supply chain, I'll say suggestions, but maybe it's more than suggestions, they've stated that. On the basis of what the applicants have said in explanation as to the slowness of the works, and giving weight to the fact that the planning authority has already approved an 18-month period, and this is just an extension to that, and then giving weight to the fact that 2 inspectors, who act in the name of the Secretary of State, of course, have also found that the ongoing building works would justify the continuation of the hoarding and the advert. The recommendation before you is to grant the further 5-month sorts. And that's the end of the presentation, Chairman.
Thank you very much for an interesting presentation. Now we have Mrs. Lloyd registered as an objector to speak against this. So when you're ready, you have 3 minutes to explain your case. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Katrina Lloyd, resident of Royal Crescent, chairman of the Royal Crescent Garden Committee and street rep for the Northern Conservation Society. I and fellow residents are objecting to the proposed extension to the planning permission for the illuminated advertising display on 186 Holland Park Avenue for the following reasons. It is not clear to us why the extension is needed and why there has been such a delay in the construction works. As Derek Taylor said, the permission was granted in December 20 and to carry on to July 2022. So works, it went up in February 21, so that's a 14-month period in which works could have been carried out on the property. As far as we can see, and we pass by every day, no work has been carried out on that property. Now, we understand part of the delay may have been because listed building consent was not granted at the time of the original planning permission for the restoration works. I would ask, why was that consent not applied for at the relevant time? Residents in the Crescent know we have to ask for listed building consent when we do any works on our property. Was it a delaying tactic to ensure there was continued revenue from the very lucrative advertising hoarding that the owner of 186 is receiving from the continued shroud being there? Permission has been granted for a hoarding on that site in 2014 and 2015, 2016 and 2017, and now the current hoarding. That's a time of 6 out of 8 years. You would normally expect work on an exterior of a premises to last longer than 5 years. The reasons of COVID and supply chain issues with Brexit, we don't agree with that. I don't know what their problems have been, but at least 3 houses in the Crescent have been completely refurbished in the last 18 months. And numerous basements have also been refurbished as a result of the flooding work. We've had no problem with that. We believe the continued extension would cause harm to the heritage significance of the listed building. The advertising shroud, as we can see from the pictures, significantly detracts from the conservation area and the entrance to Holland Park Avenue. It is also contrary to the Norland neighbourhood plan in that it's of a size, form, material and colour and method of illumination that it doesn't relate to the overall appearance of the street and is contrary to the character of the building. I would also say, as a resident, it is a nuisance to our enjoyment of our own properties. It creates significant light pollution flowing into the back of our properties and into our gardens, and it prevents our enjoyment of the premises. It also disturbs wildlife, and at a time when we're supposed to be aiming for net zero, it seems an unnecessary waste of energy and carbon consumption from the floodlighting to the advertising hoarding, which seems to be for financial gain rather than any necessary need. So, while the owner may need scaffolding to do his restoration works, we do not believe he needs to continue to receive financial gain from advertising hoarding, and we would contend that there's an element of wanting to extend the amount of time that he has the advertising up for his own benefit rather than that of the residents. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. So, colleagues, now the opportunity to put any questions you may have to Mrs. Lloyd. Would anyone like to ask a question? Councillor Bachtel.
I do understand your frustrations, but if you look on the left, this is on, I think it's on Shepherd's Bush roundabout.
Yes.
There is something 5 times bigger than this. Each time I drive there, I get confused because of the strength of the light in my eyes. I mix between the traffic lights and this. But it's 5-6 times bigger than this, which is like 20-30 meters apart.
I think it's, I'll take it down. Yes, I know, but I work for you.
Yeah, this one on Park Avenue.
Sorry, I just wanted to check with Delphine, who actually lives at 42, so she's much closer to the light than I actually am. And it's the light from the sort of overhead hanging lights that actually directly flow into the back of the houses and the gardens in a way that, the Westfield lights, yes, they're there and they're detracting. There's nothing we can do about those. But actually it's the lights that coming over the shroud directly flow into the back of the houses at the Mews and also at Royal Crescent that are nearest that shroud in.
Okay.
So there is a difference. I appreciate that, yes, Shepherd's Bush roundabout is very well lit, but those particular lights do penetrate through in a way that the others don't.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just check, Councillor Bachtel, sorry, what you're referring to, the lights? Which lights are you referring to? I thought you were saying that there's an even bigger advertisement on the roundabout. Oh, on the front of Westfield, I beg your pardon. Okay.
Well, on the other side of Shepherd's Bush roundabout, there are sort of advertising panels.
Yeah. I see. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Yes, and I think these ones sort of have a lower, and the light comes out lower from the shroud, and also there are bulbs, so they're a little bit more sort of pointed and directed.
Right. Okay. Any further questions for Mrs. Lloyd? Councillor Schmetling.
From the objections you've mentioned, Ms. Lloyd, and the comments you made, obviously the commercial considerations and others, they're not relevant to planning, obviously. But if you get down to it, it seems to me from what you said just now, the key issue is the light. So at the moment, the lights are switched off from midnight to 0600. Would the problems be alleviated if the hours were extended? Hours of shutting the lights off?
Well, I suppose, in winter, I mean, in the summer, perhaps, if they needed to go on at 10 o'clock or 9 o'clock, it may be less of an issue. But the resident or the owner has requested that this continues until December 2020. And so we're actually looking at, low light. So the lights, if he wanted to show his hoarding, he'd need to turn those lights on at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, which would be disruptive for residents. It would come into the back of the houses from any time from 4 o'clock in the winter months. And I don't see why. We don't need this sort of shroud. We don't need the lights. We don't need the energy consumption. When we don't need the light pollution.
Well, sorry to interrupt, but electricity consumption is not our planning concern. We're only concerned about the effect on the environment in terms of planning issues. And your issue seems to be the light mainly.
Well, that is one area, the light. But also, as you can see, it's considerably larger than the gable of the premises. So from a planning issue, there are concerns about affecting the conservation area for Norland, but also for the entrance to the borough. And you can't see, there's just no way you can see the Grade 2 listed building because of the shroud. So I would say that is affecting the conservation area and our enjoyment of the heritage of the site.
Have you talked to anyone in the building? Have you tried to talk to anyone in the building? Because also you mentioned that you think there's no work going on, and you mentioned there's no supply chain issues because of the work that you've seen in other premises nearby. But I can tell you we've had work done on our little block, and whilst we haven't had 6 months delay, we've also seen supply chain problems on relatively small things. But have you spoken to someone in the building?
No, I haven't. I haven't actually met the person in the building. There seems to be nobody there who one could actually ask to speak to. And in terms of supply chain issues, I don't know what exactly he needs to do, but all the houses in Royal Crescent have to be painted the same colour. So if the works he needs to do are to the exterior of the premises, which the scaffolding would suggest, then actually at least three houses have all been painted in the correct colour in the last 18 months. So presumably the suppliers of paint are providing the right colour paint.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all very much. Right, so I think that concludes the questions to Mrs. Lloyd. So we now have the opportunity to put any questions we want to officers. I'm going to ask one, if I may, first of all, Chairman's privilege. And that is, if we think this is possibly a slightly naked attempt to elongate the time that this advertisement stays up, what can we do from a planning perspective to stop it? Can we say that the harm outweighs any justification for keeping it up and refuse permission on that basis?
Yes, that would be the best, or even the only reason to refuse it. You would find that it is harmful to amenity, and you would find that the remaining time of work, whatever that really is, would not be a justification for that continued harm. What would happen then, I think, is probably material to weighing that up. There would be a right of appeal, obviously, to a refusal, and it would be open to the council, clearly, to enforce against an unauthorised advertisement as well, which would be a separate process to any appeal process. So that there'd be a couple of potential processes that could then take place.
So could enforcement take place while an appeal was live?
Not if an appeal was running, no.
Okay. All right. Well, colleagues, questions for Mr. Taylor? Councillor Idris.
And my concern is he might they might need the scaffolding to do the work, but they can have the scaffolding without all the writing and the lights and all that stuff, can they?
Yes, I mean, there are cases that they do need the scaffolding to finish off their work.
Yeah.
The schedule of works, which sets out what they would do over 5 months, I mean, has been submitted. I mean, it's, you know, whether that could be questioned or not, I don't know, but I don't think it's particularly for the planning authority to try and take the schedule apart. And I think it's the application is made on the basis that they do need the scaffolding for another 5 months.
Okay.
And therefore the adverse is sought for 5 months.
So they can have the scaffolding minus the advert. Do they have to have the advertisement?
Yes, they could. I mean, that if the advert was removed tomorrow, they could obviously keep the scaffolding there.
Yeah.
I mean, the application before us this evening is not for the scaffolding, it's only for the display of the advertisement.
Okay, thank you.
I'd just add that I'm conscious of the harm that people locally believe this has inflicted upon them. My ward is right next door, and I know it's caused considerable upset and a sense of loss of amenity. And that's the advertisement, that's not the scaffolding. So I'm highly conscious of the appeal decision myself, and conscious that this may end up with just the advertisement remaining for the period that the applicant sought it for. But I think it's possibly acceptable nonetheless to refuse it. But colleagues, any opposing view? Councillor Schmetling.
I've got a question for the officers, actually. It's the question, I mean, it's not a pretty sight, even if that were just plain white, because it's so large and it does seem to protrude. I haven't driven past there for a few weeks, so I haven't noticed it like that. If one of the issues is light, could one increase the period of switch off? And for example, if this goes on into the winter, start the switch off at, you know, I don't know, 1900, for example. Define a date in the calendar like 1st of December or 15th of November and say, at that point, you've got to switch it off at, well, random figure, set 1900, and before that, you have to switch it off at 2200.
Yes, I mean, it's entirely within the gift of the planning authority to select a reasonable period for illumination, or to put it in other words, a reasonable period for non-illumination. I mean, the condition as drafted, I mean, that's the same as the existing condition. So the last consent, that's had the same condition on it, but I mean, every case has to be evaluated on its merits, so you could come to a different conclusion this time. You don't have to follow the condition that was attached to the previous consent.
And just one follow-on, could one also, if this were granted, let's say with varied hours, could one also put in a condition to say that if building works do continue beyond whatever they've asked for here, that there will be no extension, full stop, of the advert, I mean?
Unfortunately not. But there would be a requirement in law to assess everything on its own merits. So you couldn't prevent them applying again, and you couldn't prejudice a fair decision on that application.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks very much. So I think we've heard that we can either approve it, we can tinker with it and change the conditions, or we can refuse it. Does anyone else want to ask officers a question or discuss it?
Just a clarification.
Quickly, because then we're going to move on.
Yeah, I think the earliest time I remember being on this committee was 10 p.m. Rest condition. It was something in South Kensington. Was it last year or the year before? So we could apply something similar.
I think Mr. Taylor said, yes, that's right, we can. It's in our gift to set the hours, should we want to. So, colleagues, what do we think? Do we want to amend the conditions? Do we think we should refuse it altogether, or do you think we should approve it? What's the view? Councillor Idris. Councillor Husband?
I feel we should refuse it.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Husband, what's your view?
Another difficult one. I think probably we should refuse, although clearly refusals have been overturned several times before. But I think it's an extremely prominent advert, in effect. So I think there's an element of sort of giving it another go at refusing, because I think it is, as the residents have said, it is very prominent.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
on balance, I think, see that.
Well, that's very helpful. Thank you very much. I think what we'll do then is take a vote on the recommendation as it is before us, and then, depending on how that goes, we may come back and play with the conditions if necessary. But
Well, if it goes through, then you won't be able to play with the conditions afterwards.
exactly,
So,
that's why I said depending
so
on how it goes.
if you want to vote on the recommendation now, and if you wanted to do anything about the conditions, you'd have to do it now. Like
No.
if you wanted to change it from shut off between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m., you'd have to say that now, because if it was approved, you wouldn't be able to go back and do that. So
Yeah, no, I appreciate it if it's approved. That's the case, but I have a feeling how it might go.
yes.
All right, thank you very much. So the recommendation is that the committee grants planning permission with the conditions listed in section 8 of this report. I don't think there was an addendum change, was there, to the...
Chair, would you not consider that we consider some conditions about switch off and then decide on it, because you can't come back to it?
No, I don't think we need to, do we?
Well, why not? Councillor Bakhtiar suggested it, and so have I. We just haven't discussed exactly which hours.
Do you want to...
Motion before approval.
And then we can vote on the whole
Then
thing.
we vote on the approving it.
Yeah.
Sorry, Chairman, I would suggest, I think if you thought it was useful to amend conditions about hours, then I think that might have support. But obviously that's for you, colleagues.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm happy if we'd like to discuss the conditions very quickly. The hours conditions, I think the suggestion is that it's brought forward to possibly 10 o'clock to make it consistent with South Kensington and switch off of 10 o'clock.
Hang on, Chair. I agree with the 10 p.m. in summer, but I think in winter, and we have to define that, and I would suggest maybe 15th of November, it should be turned off at 1800.
Getting rather arbitrary, I'm not sure.
Well, it's the objector, I don't know, well, let's discuss that, but the objector did make the point, it gets dark very early and it somewhat has a polluting effect.
It does.
So therefore, to deal with that, one would have to switch it off earlier. Pick a date. I just pick 15th of, make it 1st of December if you want.
Yeah, I don't know, is there support amongst the committee to start selecting dates
I think
arbitrarily for
6
switch
p.m.
off?
Yeah, 6 p.m. is too early. I think.
Okay.
8 might be acceptable. 8 for winter and 10 for summer p.m.
Okay. What date would you define? From 15th November? Or
We
from,
could say 1st of December. I
okay.
think. Yeah.
Right, so there's agreement on the committee amongst those who'd like to edit the conditions that we have a winter switch-off period from the 1st of December for an 8 p.m. switch-off and a summer, i.e. before the 1st of December, switch-off of 10 o'clock. Is that right? Yeah. Okay, so the suggestion is that we vote on those amended conditions and otherwise the recommendation in favour of the approval of the advertisement consent. So, colleagues, can I see those in favour of the amended motion, please? 3 now. Right. And those against? Right. So that's granted on that basis. Thank you very much. We now move to Camelford Court.
Thank you, Chairman. This application relates to 26 flats in 2
two to three story blocks comprising Camelford Court and the Lancaster West Estate, which you can see marked with the red icon here. There's a north block and a south block. And the proposals seek to vary a recent planning permission for roof level works to these blocks. Specifically, the proposals are for the addition of a green roof to each block, which would be designed with the Grenfell Tower heart motif. And then the proposals also include the addition of small roof lights and an amendment to the fall restraint system over the roofs of both blocks. And in these plans, those works are identified in the bubbled annotations on the proposed roof plans. So you can see the north block roof here, and on the next slide, the south block. These proposals are the outcome of a co-design process which has taken place between the Council's Lancaster West Neighbourhoods team and the residents of the estate. At this point, I'll draw your attention to the addendum report, which acknowledges that although the local planning authority did not notify all neighbouring properties of the planning application by letter, that I can confirm that the statutory consultation has been carried out through other means of publicising the application. And moreover, as noted in the report, the residents are aware of the proposals because of the co-design process that has happened, which informs the submission of this application. So, in summary, the proposals would have an acceptable impact on the appearance of the blocks, to also preserve the setting of the neighbouring Ladbroke Conservation Area to the east, and would also have an acceptable impact on neighbouring living conditions. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much indeed. No registered speakers. Colleagues, any questions?
I presume there are no issues. Sorry, could you speak into the microphone, please? I know you're being polite, but there are no particular issues, are there? I mean, it's going to improve. It's very hard for me to see what the difference is. What is the difference between the new appearance and the old appearance? There's an improvement in safety and insulation, and some of the residents have agreed with it or given their input.
Yes, the key difference is the addition of the green roof, which would be landscaped with the heart motif associated with the Grenfell Tower, and the small roof lights that would be added onto the roof as well, and the fall restraint system. So it acts as a kind of clip-on system. So if anyone had to go up onto the roof for maintenance works, it's a way of ensuring their safety once they're carrying out the works. The reason it's the subject of this application, a Section 73 application, is because the council has granted a permission for roof level works previously, and in order to amend those plans, this application has been submitted to supersede the drawings with a revised roof plan that shows these landscaping works to the roof and the roof lights.
Just as a matter of interest, this green roof that hasn't been there before, isn't there now, presumably, what will that be? Will that be real grass or pardon? Or what would it be? And what, just as a matter of interest, what are the maintenance cost implications?
I'm afraid I don't know what the maintenance cost impact is of installing a green roof, but it is a living green roof. It's not an artificial grass.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Idris.
So is the roof, as you said, just grass, no planting, no other plants, for instance, pollinators?
We don't have a schedule of species for the plant.
Okay.
I appreciate these drawings must be quite difficult to see, and I don't think they've come out correctly on the packs either, but if you can see my cursor,
Because
we're looking at quite a small area of the roof anyway.
Yeah. As a council, we are very proud of our B Superhighway, and we just won an award for it, and I was just hoping maybe it will be one of our lovely pollinator corridors. That's all.
Yes, I mean, just as background to this application, the council's Lancaster West Neighbourhood team have an aspiration to work with residents on this estate to retrofit the homes.
There are about 800 residents on this estate, and the intention is to bring these homes into a better standard of accommodation whilst also achieving better thermal efficiency, improving fire safety, and also, importantly, listening to the residents and trying as much as possible to amend and improve the homes to their preferences. So this is very much a proposal that has been led by the co-design process. Unfortunately, I don't have the specification of the green roof, but it, as a background to the scheme, it ties into the overall ambition to improve the sustainability of the estate.
Right. If there are no further questions, we will vote on the recommendation that is before us, and that is that the committee grants planning permission with the conditions listed in section 9 of this report. Can I please see those in favour of the recommendation? Those against? Right. 5. Nem con. Thank you very much. And we'll move to Barrington Walk, please.
Thank you. This application is also relating to the Lancaster West Estate, this time the 3 blocks of Hurstway, Barrington and Testerton, which are 3 6-storey blocks of 368 flats. The proposals concern the roof level and the top floor terraces of these blocks, and the same works are proposed across each of them. And the works proposed here are primarily to improve the thermal efficiency and fire safety of these buildings. This slide here shows the existing roof and top floor terraces to the left, and on the right gives an overview of the existing roof conditions and the areas of the building that are the subject of this application. So it's the flat roof areas and the terraces on the penultimate story of these buildings. Turning then to the proposals. Firstly, the replacement of the roof build-up with new insulation and waterproofing, which, if you can read that diagram, are 5 and 6 shown in green. And with that, the associated construction of a new upstand and parapet with a replacement steel balustrade behind it. And again, these proposals are the outcome of a co-design process between the Council's Lancaster West Neighbourhood team and estate residents. The residents have been presented with design options for the parapet finish, and as you'll see from recommended condition 3 and 4, the report recommends seeking the details of the facing materials of the parapet and the balustrade as something to be left for conditions. The proposals also include the replacement of 31 single glazed roof lights with double glazing and integrated automatic opening vents. The purpose of these would be to act as a smoke extract, but also provide a means of a mechanically controlled natural ventilation system that would prevent overheating. The application also includes proposals for replacement floor finishes of the terraces and the dividing screens between the terraces. And again, because of the co-design process that has been undertaken, the actual finishing materials have not yet been selected, and again, recommended condition 3 would seek to secure details of those dividing screens as well as the terrace finish. So subject to the recommended conditions controlling details of the materials and design, the proposals would preserve the appearance of these blocks. It would also improve the thermal efficiency and fire safety measures of these buildings and have an acceptable impact on neighbouring living conditions. And that concludes the presentation.
Thank you very much indeed. No registered speakers. Colleagues, any questions for Ms. Savarez?
Just to say, it doesn't look like there's a big change in overall appearance. It's just an improvement in the building. Is that a good summary, or would you like to add to that?
Yes, these are minor works of alteration. They obviously affect a great number of homes just because of the number of flats in the building, but the most discernible impact visually would be the addition of the parapet which is why the condition can control those details carefully to ensure the design is complementary to the existing building. And there would be glimpses of the terrace screens, but certainly the floor finish of the terraces and the build-up of the roof, you'd have to be kind of flying over the building to see that. So it's not going to be widely visible.
Thanks.
Yeah, Ms. Saras has just made the point that I was going to make, that final appearance is dealt with by conditions, so hopefully we can trust officers to look after that. Colleagues, any views that you'd like to share before we vote? No? Okay. Well, the recommendation is that the committee grants planning permission with the conditions listed in section 9 of this report. I don't think there are any amendments in the addendum, are there? Can I see those in favour of the recommendation? Thank you very much. Yeah, that's all 5 in favour. Thank you very much. We'll move to Earls Court Road, please.
Thank you very much. There are a pair of applications at 117 Earls Court Road. There's planning permission for a new shopfront and then the control of advertisement consent for the associated signage. This is the application site in its present state. You see the shopfront there marked with the blue arrow. And then this slide, sorry, I took the photographs myself. They're not the best, but it gives you an idea of the parade of shops of which number 117 is part of. Under the proposals, a new aluminium framed shopfront would be introduced. And then you can see the 2 signs that are also seeking permission and advertisement consent, sorry. There's the fascia sign above the shopfront, and then an internally illuminated projecting sign. Just to clarify, that is internally illuminated. I think in the report there is an error there. The application is before you as Councillor Spalding, before he sadly passed, called it in for a committee decision. Thank you.
Thanks very much. No registered speakers. Colleagues, any questions for Ms. Hurrell? I'd just make an observation that we do need to look at this very closely because Councillor Spalding called it in quite rightly. I went to see the site last night. I did notice that the existing building is not much to write home about, as we see on the slide there, and it is surrounded by buildings with pretty shabby advertisements and hoardings and projecting signs, and it's probably better than what's there. And also to take into account that we're not at all considering the use here of the building as a restaurant. We're just considering the planning permission and investment consent. So, anyone else like to make any points?
I just to ask, these are 2 pictures on there, right? Because they're not right. There's nothing at right angles on the street.
Yeah, sorry, that's me not having a wide-angle camera available. So that's 2 pictures I've merged together to give you an idea. As I say, there's the shop front there, the white metal framed one you can see on the screen there.
Right, that's okay. Thanks. Google Street View seems to handle that quite well.
Right.
What's the problem actually? Is it bright lights? I mean, I'm just given what there is already. I mean, it's presumably just as you say, an internally illuminated sign and fits in with all the other illuminated signs.
Yeah, I mean, and speaking on behalf of Councillor Spalding, I know that he had ambitions to raise the quality of the shop fronts in general along Earls Court, and I think that's where this stems from. And it's a admirable aspiration that we should always be trying to push for better. Nonetheless, officers' opinion is that this is better than what's there, and we have to take into account the context and the immediate neighbours, and given that, officers conclude that actually this is acceptable.
Well, I must say, thanks. If it is better than what is there, then it's already a step forward. Otherwise, if you only ever look at what's next to it and there's no improvement, nothing will get better. But if you're saying it is an improvement over what's there, then that's a step in the right direction, isn't it? Yeah, thanks very much.
So, any further comments? No. Well, the recommendation is that the committee grants planning permission. This is the planning permission application, first of all. The committee grants planning permission with the conditions listed in section 9 of this report. I don't think there are any amendments in the addendum. Could I please see those in favour of the planning permission? Against? Abstentions? So 4 in favour and 1 abstention. Thank you very much. And then the advertisement consent recommendation is that the committee grants control of advertisement consent with the conditions listed in section 8 of this report. Please see those in favour. Advertisement consent. Thank you. Objections? Against? And abstentions? Councillor Idris again abstaining. 4 in favour. Thank you very much. We move to Harcourt Terrace. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm starting my presentation with a photograph of the existing light well to the property. You can see there the existing entrance, which is below the raised ground floor entrance. Under the proposals, this would be infilled to create a new lobby area. So you can see the existing on the left, proposed on the right. You'll just see that the door shifts across. I went down to site this morning and walked along, and there are numerous examples of where this has been done elsewhere, including the 2 properties, the photographs on the screen there at number 36 and number 32. The proposals also include some changes to the fenestration within the courtyard area. I've included the floor plan on the right-hand side there. That shows you the location of that courtyard area. It's sort of halfway back in the property. There's an existing kitchen window which would become a door into this courtyard area, but importantly there is already a door into the courtyard area currently in the living room, and indeed under the application that would be converted to a window. At the rear of the property there are existing sliding doors. You can see in the photograph on the screen. Under the proposals, new bifold doors would be introduced. And then the last part of the proposals relates to the existing garden and steps. This photographs the existing stone steps at the rear. And again, the existing on the left-hand side. And under the proposals, the garden would be lowered and new, wider steps introduced to that lowered area. And those are the proposals, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. No registered speakers on this. Colleagues, any questions?
Well, should we just note the fact that there seems to be civil law issue here? I'm not sure what they mean by the occupant squatting, but presumably, well, she's living there, but that's nothing to do with planning, is it? Because that's given as a ground for refusal.
Yeah, yes, there's civil matters, and some of the other objections refer to access issues and things like that, but yeah, none of that should be considered under the planning merits of the scheme.
Because one of the objections at least also says that the company that owns the freehold hasn't agreed to that, but that's again civil matter, isn't it?
Private law issue.
Yeah, you might deem the proposals acceptable and grant permission this evening, but that doesn't necessarily mean the works can get carried out, as there might be other permissions also needed, such as from the freeholder.
Right. Any other points that you'd like to make? No? Okay, in which case we will vote on the recommendation, which is that the committee grants planning permission with the conditions listed in section 8 of this report. Any addendum changes? Don't think so. What?
There was just a tweak to the trigger for condition 4, just to clarify that it doesn't need to be prior to any works commencing. It just relates to the works to the garden. So a minor amendment there to the condition.
A minor amendment to condition 4. Could I please see those in favour of the recommendation? Unanimously. Thank you very much. So we move to Cave Place, please.
Thank you, Chairman. To start with, just a bit of background. You'll have seen from the report that this site has been through an appeal decision. So planning permission was granted via an allowed appeal for the demolition of the existing building and the construction of a replacement 3-storey dwelling. The photos on the screen show you the existing property, and this image shows you the approved scheme. Just point out the works that they're now seeking planning permission for relate to the top story. You can see on the image on the right hand side there's a roof terrace area with a glazed balcony. The application before you this evening is for all the works that have been approved under the appeal and a subsequent minor material amendment application. So that is for the demolition of the building, the replacement with the building as you've just seen. But in addition, planning permission is now sought for an air source heat pump that would be located on that balcony area I just showed you. So the plans on the screen show you that now, on elevation on the left-hand side, and then the plan on the right-hand side. This would be screened by planters as well as that screening you saw in the image. These are the sort of artist illustrations of that, which might be helpful for you to picture it. But as I said, you are considering the whole application afresh, but you know, you're encouraged to give appropriate weight to both the recent approvals. So really the main assessment should be on the acceptability of the new air source heat pump. Standard conditions have been applied regarding noise and vibration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. No registered speakers? Not if you haven't registered, I'm afraid, but thank you anyway. Colleagues, any questions for Ms. Hurrell? She covered one point in particular that's worth pointing out. I was interested in, that was the hoarding and the usual condition that we would apply to air conditioning units, also covered in this, for the air source heat pump, which is very similar to an air conditioning unit. Worth making that point. Councillor Bakhtiar.
Well, I have been through the objectors' letters and their points. I think the main objection is about the height of the building and adding another level, another story to the building, which is, in my view, the only way to add any extra housing units in this borough is to go up or to dig basements. There isn't any alternative. What difference is that? Is it 2 meters overall between the existing building and the new building?
I'm afraid I don't know the answer to that. I'm wondering whether the plans in your pack might assist in making that. As I say, I would stress that the height of the building has been approved twice, both by the allowed appeal and then by the more recent minor material amendment. Yes, the height of the building, as you can see on the proposed plans, if I return.
Because I was curious, what will the new height be in comparison to the existing buildings? That I was hoping you can have some CGIs to just so we can have an idea. Because my concern is the whole area. Will the height of the new building tower over the rest of the area?
So the image on the screen, as you can see now, that is the most recent approval. So that's the scheme approved under the minor material amendment. So that gives you an idea of the height compared to the existing buildings. If I return to my first slide, there's the existing property. So it is taller. All I would say is that height has been deemed to be acceptable both by the inspector and then by the local planning authority in the subsequent application to amend that allowed appeal permission.
Will it create overlooking or shadowing?
The inspector concluded it would not.
Yeah, inspector doesn't live around here, does he?
I'm sorry, we can't hear from you. If you
Just a sec.
haven't registered to speak, you can't address us on this. I'm really sorry.
So,
I'm afraid we have our processes, and I'm terribly sorry, but you're not allowed to speak at this point.
but
So, Councillor Idris.
if, I mean, I understand the inspector deems it acceptable, but let's face it, he or she doesn't live here. So, I know we have to put a weight on it, but
Yeah. I mean, this is a new application, so it is right that you consider it in the round, and that includes all the elements. However, my advice to you is that we need to give significant weight to both the inspector's decision of 2020 and the local planning authority's recent decision in 2021, which allowed for the amendments to that. The inspector, in coming to that conclusion, would have visited the site and assessed it against our local plan policies. So things like residential amenity overshadowing would have been part of the assessment made by that inspector.
can I see the other picture again, please? Thank you. And you don't have the same angle that you had from the old picture, is it? Whereby you can see them side by side, more or less.
I'm just checking in case you might have that within the pack, but I don't think we do, I'm afraid.
You can't see the height difference.
Not clearly.
Chairman, may I just come in here?
Thank you very much, Mr. Lomas.
Just to be absolutely clear, whilst this is a new application for planning permission has been granted, so the matters you are currently considering have already been considered, and nothing has changed.
So
in
why
this
are we
application.
considering it? If it's already been considered, maybe I'm stupid, why are we considering it? What are we considering anything new, or is it just the
Yeah.
same old stuff?
So as Ms. Hurrell explained in her presentation,
Yeah.
that an air source heat pump has been introduced. So that has meant they have applied for the whole development again with the inclusion of that. So you do have to consider the scheme as a whole, but if you decided to, for instance, refuse planning permission on basis of the height of the building, there is no planning outcome of that, because planning permission has been granted. So you're effectively, you will be refusing something that serves no purpose, because the height of the building is being considered acceptable,
Yeah.
and planning permission has been granted on that basis. So realistically, all you really are considering is the change from the previous permission to what is included here. And that's what you really need to focus your assessment on tonight.
So if I refuse the change, it's not going to change anything in the heights, but it's just...
No, because planning permission has been granted.
Yeah.
And can be built out.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay, all right.
that's, I think, the key point.
Mine,
but,
okay.
yeah, I entirely agree, Councillor Idris. It is very confusing, and you're not being stupid at all. And I perfectly well understand it from residents' point of view as well. It seems very odd that the scheme is coming back before us, and we're being asked to consider these things, but then told that we shouldn't consider these things. So we do sympathise. But as Mr. Lomas has correctly said, there is an extant planning permission that could be built out minus the air source heat pump. So effectively all we're considering is the air source heat pump. So,
Yeah, so how big is this heat pump, and why is it potentially significant?
So the heat pump you can see there on the proposed plan on the screen. I've circled it in red for you. The dimensions given, there you go, unit size is 1.3 by 55 by 1.2. Sorry, 0.55. In terms of why you're being asked to consider it and why it's been included in an app in the realm with everything else, the building's not yet there, so they couldn't apply for the air source heat pump in isolation because the roof that it would be situated on, the terrace area, does not currently exist.
So how high is this? How much does it rise above the planned roof? So I couldn't understand. You mentioned the dimension, but I didn't get it.
How high is the air source heat pump?
Yes, I mean...
It might not be easy to see on the screen, but if you have a look in your pack, the first architectural drawing in your plan, so opposite the illustrations, you can see it on the right-hand side.
Sorry,
There's a planter labelled.
Hang on. Which page am I looking at?
The second, the first drawing.
Okay, there's the street.
So the height of it would not be any higher. It sits below the height of the glass balustrade that already has approval, if that helps.
Yeah.
So it has no effect on outlook, because obviously there are a number of objections talking about overlooking and light loss, but that's all been dealt with in the past.
That's
So
right.
whatever we may
Fine.
think today is
So
irrelevant. So
the-
it's only the effect of the structure for the heat pump.
That's right, and the height of that is shown to be below the height of the existing balustrade. So I can't see how it would have any impact in
And
terms of.
as there are no windows in it, presumably, that doesn't add to the overlooking, although it might add to loss of light.
I think given the location, and as I say, it's below the height of the existing, well, not the existing, the approved balustrade, I can't see how there'd be any impact on loss of light.
Okay, well, thanks. Well, that's clarified it. It wasn't clear to me either.
Yeah. No, you're right. There's the final part of the jigsaw. So, colleagues, any further observations?
I think we have a choice. Heat pump's a good thing anyway, in theory.
Yeah. Well, we're, as we've heard, rather toothless in what we can do here, because we've heard there's an extant planning permission, and this is really simply for the addition of the air source heat pump. And so we just have to be satisfied that we're happy with the addition of that air source heat pump and that there are suitable conditions in place to deal with things like noise, because rather like an air conditioning unit, an air source heat pump does make a noise and also can look ugly. So we often condition them that they have to be within some kind of hoarding or something like that. So that's why I asked officers whether the standard condition related to air conditioning units was included, and I think it is.
Yes, Chairman, conditions 13 and 14. The titles refer to air conditioning equipment, so I would suggest that actually just to be entirely clear, they are amended to refer to the heat pump, but the condition wording themselves talks about plant, so there's no suggested changes to that, but just to clarify, you might want to change the titles.
Yeah.
Ms. Hurrell, there's a major omission, which I've seen before, and that's actually stating what the figures are, and they should be minus 10 decibels from ambient for steady tone, if I remember rightly, and 15 if it's varying, or the other way around, but I think that's the right way around. There's no decibels stated here.
Is that right, Ms. Howell?
That's happened before, and I've had to...
Yes,
Get it
I mean,
right.
this is the wording as recommended by the Environmental Health Officer, but you're right, it does differ to how we sometimes see it worded with where the decibels are specified.
It doesn't give you any decibels, that's the point.
Yeah.
It should be below ambient at any time. Therefore, in other words, if you can hear it next door, it's too loud, according to what I've been told by Environmental Health
Yeah.
Officer the last 4 years.
Yeah.
But figures have to be specified. There's no figures in there.
So what we could do is leave a slight amendment to the conditions to officers, if we're happy to give them the direction, as it were. of-
To include the decibels
Yeah.
within the condition. Yeah.
Yeah. And the change of the title.
Does it matter that it says air conditioning plant and we're actually talking about a...
That's what I'm
that would
suggesting
be-
in the change of the title, just to deal with it
I
being-
think, just to be clear, I think the condition probably stands regardless because it refers to plant, but just to be entirely clear, we'll change the titles on those as well. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, are we happy?
Yes.
As happy as we can be in the
I think
circumstances? Yeah.
we should be concerned that this doesn't happen again, that there's no actual figures put in, that is an error. I've seen this condition many times with the figures in there. I have seen it once or twice, perhaps, with them not there, and they had to be inserted afterwards.
Okay, well, that's all noted. Thank you very much, Councillor Schmetterling. So, colleagues, let us vote on the recommendation that the committee grants planning permission with the conditions listed in section 8 of this report and the 2 plant conditions amended as we've just discussed, with certain details left over to be dealt with by officers to deal with decibels. So, could I please see those in favour of that recommendation? So that is unanimously in favour. Thank you very much. And we move to the kiosk outside the Gloucester Road Arcade. Thank you very much.
Thank you. This application's before the committee for decision as RBKC is the applicant. The photos on the screen at the moment are of the existing kiosk. You're probably all familiar with it as you head out of Waitrose. This is the kiosk when not in use, and then here's a photograph of it when it is open. It's proposed to replace the kiosk with a slightly smaller one. These illustrations, these photographs are an example of what it would look like in terms of the general appearance. So just to give you an idea, so the timber framed, the colour would be a different green, but largely you're looking at something comparable to what you can see on these photographs. And then the last slide just gives you the elevational and plan details. So same location, slightly smaller and brighter. Yeah, thank you.
Right, no registered speakers. Seems to me to be an improvement. My comment. Very near my flat. I'm looking forward to it being improved. But otherwise, colleagues, any points you'd like to make? No? Okay. Well, we will vote on the recommendation as it's set out in the report, which I imagine is just that the committee grants planning permission with the conditions listed in section, whatever it is. Conditions listed in section 8 of this report. Can I see those in favour, please? Councillor Schmetling, are you voting?
For.
Thank you very
to
much.
Approve.
Right, so all in
Sorry.
favour. Thank you very much. And then finally to Cathcart Road, please.
Thank you very much. Another application before you this evening where a lot of the proposals already benefit from planning permission. There is an existing rear elevation approved under the most recent planning permission. You can see it on the screen there. Under this current proposal, as well as this rear extension, there would be a new timber window introduced above it. Currently, that window is UPVC. Also under the proposals, there would be a new garden room created. Here's the existing section, and then the proposed section. So the circled area shows you the rear extension, and then the arrow is that new garden room. The last slide just gives you a bit more details about that garden room. It would be aluminium framed with sliding doors, and another illustration there of a mock-up of what it might look like when it's built. The last slide, just for context, shows you the depth of the garden at the property. The boundary is somewhere there underneath those big trees, but you'll see they are deep gardens. It's also worth pointing out that immediately on the other side of that rear boundary, the property opposite does have a outbuilding in a comparable location. Thank you.
Very helpful. Thank you very much. No registered speakers. Colleagues. Fairly straightforward application, I would agree with you. And I'm very pleased to see the replacement of UPVC windows. So that's strongly in favour. Very kind of this applicant. And the garden building is possibly a little bit contentious. I've seen people get very upset about these garden buildings in the past, but and it's interesting in section 6.8 that officers write there are not many outbuildings within the neighbouring properties. However, the neighbour to the rear does have a similar sized outbuilding in the rear of their garden, as Ms Harrell pointed out. But also, given the high vegetation cover, the proposed outbuilding would still be discreet from private views, and the garden roof would help. The green roof, I beg your pardon, would help to retain the character of a garden, which I think must be right. But colleagues, questions, comments? Otherwise, let us vote on the recommendation and be done with it. Okay, well, the recommendation is that the committee grants planning permission with conditions listed in section 8 of this report, and I don't know if there were any amendments to those conditions. Very minor amendments to those conditions in the addendum. So can I please see those in favour of the recommendation? Unanimously in favour. There we are. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Chairman, just if I may very briefly, at the end of this meeting, which I think might be the last formal council meeting before the elections, when I know you are not standing again and retiring from the council, just on behalf of colleagues on the committee, I think we should thank Councillor O'Connor for his chairing of Planning Applications Committee and being Vice Chairman of the Planning Committee over the last number of years.
Thank you very much.